On the verge of turning 30 and feeling the societal pressure to settle down, I desperately reached out to everyone I knew, asking, "Does anyone know a good match for me?" Through a friend's introduction, I met John, and after nearly a year of dating, we decided to get married. Just 2 months into our marriage, I found myself at my wits' end, yearning for a divorce as soon as possible. Looking back, there were a few red flags while we were dating, but my overwhelming desire to get married blinded me to all of John's flaws. They say hindsight is 20/20, and it couldn't be truer in my case. My name is Mia, a 29-year-old nurse, and John, who is 8 years older than me, turned out to be a boastful and compulsive liar. From the very start, he misled me about his job. John had claimed to be the store manager at the supermarket where he worked, but the truth was far from that. He was just a regular employee with no specific position. I didn't judge him for his job, but the deceit hurt. The truth came out when we were planning our wedding guest list. He casually mentioned, "We have to invite the store manager Alex and the assistant manager David," exposing his lie. "Wait, I thought you said you were the manager," I confronted John, feeling a wave of confusion and disbelief. He nonchalantly responded, "I never said that. I only mentioned that I'd eventually become the manager." "What? You lied?" My voice trembled with shock and betrayal. But with the wedding venue already booked and our families introduced, the pressure was immense. Sensing my hesitation, John added, almost as a threat, "If you really mind, we don't have to get married." Caught up in the moment and fearing the consequences, I regretfully replied, "No, let's get married," a decision I now see as a mistake. John, trying to appear confident and nonchalant, said, "You didn't fall for my job title. You fell for me, right? The details don't matter. Just follow me without fuss." "Is that so?" His attempt at being cool only made the situation worse. The urge to question him, then why lie about being a manager in the first place, rose within me, but I swallowed my words, not wanting to start an argument. The next deception revolved around our living situation, which ultimately led to us moving in with John's parents. Before marriage, both John and I had been living with our respective parents, but I had proposed, "Let's build a house halfway between our parents' homes once we're married." Having always dreamed of owning a detached family house, I was determined to make this dream a reality. Growing up in a rundown rental, I had saved diligently for this purpose. John seemed on board, so house hunting became a regular part of our dates with visits to housing exhibitions and real estate agents. However, when it came time to make a decision, I suggested, should we consider the place we saw last week? Being close to an elementary school would be beneficial, don't you think? John started, "My sister doesn't want to live near an elementary school because it's too noisy. She prefers being close to a convenience store, and my mom wants to be near a hospital. My dad, on the other hand, doesn't care as long as there's space for his puzzle collection." I was taken aback. Why are your sisters, mother's, and father's preferences coming into this? I had always envisioned it would be just the two of us. What? You knew this, didn't you? As the eldest son, it's only natural that we'd build a duplex for the whole family to live together. This was completely new information to me. I had always imagined us living alone, and I thought John was on the same page. "If that's the case," I replied, "I'm the eldest daughter, and my mother is alone at home. Your family still has both of your parents, remember? You're a woman, and I'm a man. It's different. Besides, your mother is fine with you getting married, right?" "That may be true," I responded, but I wasn't aware of this. As an only daughter, I'm concerned about my mother living alone. Initially, I considered marrying someone who would join our family, but finding someone who met those criteria was challenging. Once my mother reassured me, saying, "I'll be fine, so focus on your own happiness," I started dating John. John added, "I didn't mention this before, but my sister doesn't work and my parents rely on their pension. As the eldest son, it's our responsibility to support them." Hold on a minute, don't include me in this so casually. I might be willing to adjust to living with my in-laws, but having his sister move in as well is something I can't accept. His sister, despite being in good health and having no illness, refuses to work because she prefers a life of leisure. His mother shares similar traits, while his father, though quiet, spends his days watching TV and working on his puzzles without contributing to housework. Ha! You're the wife of the eldest son. Are you saying you have no intention of supporting the family? I was stunned. Was he serious? If he wanted to support them, he should do so within his own means. My dream of a new single-family home was quickly fading. John remained resolute. I'm not backing down. If you're unhappy with this arrangement, we can just get a divorce. So, for the time being, I decided to move in with John's family, believing it was the best decision under the circumstances. I put aside my dream of building our own house, unwilling to squander the savings I had diligently accumulated during my single years. Consequently, after our marriage, I found myself living with John's family. Both John and I worked different shifts, he at the supermarket and I as a nurse, including night shifts. Shortly after moving in, I was jolted awake by my mother-in-law yanking off my blanket after a night shift. Sleeping until noon is unacceptable for a daughter-in-law, she said sternly. I just got back a little while ago and have another night shift tomorrow, I replied, struggling to keep my eyes open. Stop complaining and do some housework, prepare lunch for us. What are you doing? She insisted. I quietly pushed my mother-in-law out of the room. This was no joke. I desperately needed my rest. Maya, who do you think you are? I could still hear my mother-in-law ranting from the hallway, but I chose to ignore her. I locked the door, inserted earplugs, wrapped myself in a blanket, and went back to sleep. I finally woke up around 3:00 p.m. and started tackling the housework. It struck me as odd. In this house, there are 3 other healthy adults besides me, yet I seem to be the only one expected to handle both housework and a full-time job. Just then, John came home. Hey, Mia, I heard what happened. You were home all day and didn't make lunch for my mom? Well, I was exhausted. Besides, when I'm not around, you all manage on your own, so why can't you do the same while I'm sleeping? I shot back, noticing John's parents and sister smirking behind him. What about you? Didn't you say you'd be working until tonight? I left early because my sister called with a family emergency. All this fuss just because I didn't make lunch. It's ridiculous. My frustration bubbled to the surface, only escalating the situation. John's scolding intensified, adding more fuel to the fire. Is marriage really supposed to be this difficult for a wife? With no respite at my in-laws' home, I began making excuses to return to my mother's house on particularly tough days or during my days off. My mother welcomed me without question. I wanted a divorce, but I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. Then the topic of moving came up at my mother's house. They need us to find a new place by next year. The rental house my mother was living in had severe leaks, and the landlord decided it would be better to demolish it rather than undertake costly repairs. That's right, it's not immediate, but we need a pet-friendly apartment, my mother explained. After my father passed away, she started volunteering to temporarily foster abandoned or lost cats. Although we lived in a nearly 50-year-old rental, the landlord had been understanding about her fostering work. Then I'll help look too, I said. It was a perfect way to occupy my time on days off, assist my mother, and indulge my interest in property hunting. It was a win-win situation. While visiting various real estate agencies, my mother sighed. A detached family house is just a pipe dream. That's when it hit me. A divorce could solve everything. A house is a lifetime investment, and I want to live with someone I truly care about. Then, as if by fate, we stumbled upon Cat Ears Construction. The sign featuring a cat picture and the banner reading "Homes for Cat Lovers" drew us in. We couldn't resist checking it out. Inside, a friendly clerk eagerly detailed their offerings, including an atrium and outdoor cages for cats. I had always thought cats were strictly indoor pets, but they offered sunrooms for sunbathing and large cages with special doors allowing safe outdoor access. We listened intently and left with a stack of brochures. As we walked out, I declared, "I'm going to get a divorce and move in with you, Mom." That came out of nowhere, my mom said, clearly surprised but choosing not to comment further. I couldn't see John, his parents, or his sister changing for the better, and I feared the mistreatment would only worsen. I was done just going along with things. By the time I got home, it was already evening. I quickly started preparing dinner and set the brochures aside in a bag on the sofa to review later. The laundry I'd done earlier was still sitting there, and the kitchen table was cluttered with the remnants of the frozen pizzas and forks my in-laws and sister-in-law had used for lunch. You're the wife. How long are you going to keep loafing around? I'm starving. Sorry about that, but your sister could have made something, you know. What? That's ridiculous. My sister-in-law was visibly upset, but I chose not to let it bother me. Soon enough, we'd be strangers anyway. Later that night, my husband came home and immediately scolded me. Hey, there's only $700 in the account for this month's expenses. I quickly fabricated a story. Oh, sorry. There was an administrative issue at work, so my salary will be delayed. All right then, make sure to deposit it as soon as you get paid or we're getting a divorce. Sure, I replied. When we first moved in together last month, we discussed how to manage household expenses. John insisted that I contribute almost my entire salary of $2,500 while he would only contribute $700, keeping the rest for himself. I couldn't agree to that, so I insisted on equal contributions. As a result, I've only been depositing $700 for the past 2 months. I consulted a lawyer, prepared for divorce, sorted through my belongings, and stayed busy with work and organizing my parents' home. John, who typically had different days off, had recently started spending more time out with his parents and occasionally his sister. I found it unusual but convenient. One day, John announced, "I've bought a new duplex. We're signing the mortgage next Monday. Just so you know, if you oppose this, we'll be getting a divorce." He even handed me the divorce papers with a surprising level of consideration. A house? What are you talking about? You remember those housing brochures you brought home? I went with a different major builder, but it's still based on what you wanted. You'll need to use all your savings for this. Indeed, we had discussed saving for a home during our property search. Can I see those divorce papers, please? I asked, my mind spinning with shock, but realizing this was actually a chance I had been waiting for. I took the papers from him, skimming through them and noting they were already filled out. I had to suppress a laugh. John was unaware of my own preparations for divorce, so he thought threatening me with this would force me to comply. Fearing divorce was a thing of the past. Now, I was eager to finalize it. I completed the divorce papers and submitted them first thing the next morning. Since I hadn't brought any large items like furniture and in gradually moving my belongings out, leaving was relatively easy. I headed straight back to my mom's house. Despite John's persistent calls and emails that night, I chose to ignore them all. A few days later, my ex-husband showed up at my parents' home with his parents and sister, all visibly fuming. "Hey, what's going on? Why aren't you coming home?" he demanded. "I simply filed for divorce after receiving the divorce papers," I replied nonchalantly. "Don't play games with me. I'd even built a house for us." "Well, you did that without consulting me and threatened divorce if I opposed. That was your decision," I reminded him. Maybe because we were at my mom's house, my mother-in-law was unusually subdued and attempted to downplay the situation, saying, "John must have been joking. Filling out divorce papers as a joke isn't funny. Our personalities clash completely, so I see this as a chance to end things. Irreconcilable differences are a valid reason for divorce," I said firmly. My sister-in-law jumped in. "We'll be in trouble without you. Who will provide for us? Who will pay the mortgage? That's something your family will need to figure out on your own. I'm a stranger now. Besides, why should I be responsible for a perfectly healthy sister-in-law?" I retorted. My father-in-law glared at me in silence. "I never thought you could be so cold," John said, clearly hurt. "Well, that sounds like a difference in values to me. Yet another perfect reason for divorce," I quipped. When I consulted with a lawyer, I learned that citing irreconcilable differences or a clash of values alone isn't typically enough to easily secure a divorce. However, in John's case, his lies about his job and income, his abusive behavior, and his attempt to unilaterally make me cover all living expenses made the reasons for our divorce clear-cut. On top of that, he bought a duplex on his own and threatened me with a pre-filled divorce form. "I won't accept this divorce," John insisted. "Even if you refuse to acknowledge it, you prepared the papers yourself, and your parents are witnesses," I said, showing him the photo I had taken of the completed form before submitting it to the lawyer. At that moment, my mother appeared, filming everything on her phone. "What do you think you're doing to my daughter? I've called the police. I've recorded everything, and I can make this public if needed," she declared. Although my mom hadn't said anything, her anger was palpable. My father-in-law, clearly unnerved by the mention of the police, started to panic. "Please, no police. This will make things look terrible. Just stop." I had always seen my father-in-law as the quiet type, but it became clear he could speak up when it mattered. I found it oddly revealing that John's tendency to boast might have come from his father. With that realization, John and his family reluctantly left. "What are we going to do now? We can't afford the mortgage," I overheard them lament. "Well, I suppose we'll have to cancel," they said. I knew that if they were already under contract, there would be cancellation fees, and with John's income alone, affording the house would be impossible. It was their own doing. Later on, likely concerned about their public image, John and his family settled with me without further fuss. A few months after, my mom and I moved into our dream home, a brand new detached house designed by Cat Ears Construction, specifically tailored for the comfort of rescue cats. Knowing about my mom's work with rescue animals, the company built the perfect house for us at a significantly reduced price. Both my mom and I were overjoyed. Though I might have rushed into marriage and made a major mistake, I now realize that without that experience, I might never have considered building this home. Watching the cats enjoy the sun and settle in comfortably, I couldn't help but feel that everything had turned out for the best.